Welcome to the Rise Above Project. I'm your host, Joe Perroni. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist, champion bodybuilder, and I've been a personal trainer for about 30 years. This podcast is about helping people with their emotional, spiritual, and physical fitness. I value strength, toughness, and truth. I despise complacency, the victim mentality, and following the herd. If you find my work to be valuable, please subscribe to my channel and tell a friend. Today, I want to talk about male suicide. According to the CDC, 47,000 Americans committed suicide in 2017. The suicide epidemic is a multifaceted, highly sensitive subject and is a difficult issue to grapple with. There are plenty of correlations and moving parts, but no definitive causations of suicide. Thus, there are no easy answers as to why it has become an epidemic or how to fix it. In order to have a chance at fixing it, one must have an open mind and be led by the evidence, no matter where it leads. To make matters worse, we must discuss gender divide, cultural differences, income disparity, as well as issues and observations that are not politically correct. And in the end, there may not be much motivation to change anything. So this show is going to be a bumpy ride for a lot of people. Let's be specific about who is affected most by the suicide epidemic. Now, we are told by the media that the suicide epidemic is a man's problem because men are 4 times as likely as women to commit suicide. Now, that's true, but it conveniently omits the fact that women report more suicide ideation and attempt suicide about twice as often as men. We are also told that women are diagnosed with depression and are treated with psychotropic meds more often than men. These statistics are dubious and don't tell the full story. Men don't go to therapy that often, or they don't actually ask for help as often as women either. And even when they do, the symptoms of depression are different for men and can be overlooked. When factoring in male symptoms of depression, such as, believe it or not, anger, irritability, and risky behaviors, the prevalence of depression becomes equal with women. The men who are diagnosed with depression and are prescribed antidepressant medications, they don't do very well. The medications typically will cause sexual side effects that can and does add to their depression and shame. And this may increase the chances of suicide. How ironic. Now, because I value everyone's time, I'm going to announce the spoiler alert right about now, because the evidence clearly points to where the male suicide epidemic lies. And I'm telling you now because if the facts offend you in any way, I want you to have the opportunity to spend your time somewhere else and somewhere where you feel comfortable. Typically, men pride themselves on being against political correctness. But those are words, because personally, I have not really seen that. So let's really see if that's true. The population with the highest risk for committing suicide is correlated to white men, 45 to 64 years old, men who are depressed, angry, and irritable, and they are relatively uneducated, meaning a high school diploma or less, and without a trade. They tend to own guns. They're economically stressed. They live in rural areas. There's typically drug and alcohol abuse. They're uninsured. They worry about minorities and women gaining power and status. And men who are neurotically concerned about the status of their masculinity. Some might ask, what is that? Well, fragile masculinity, or men concerned about their manhood, was determined by how many times this segment of the population Googled topics such as penis enlargement, Viagra, erectile dysfunction, and how to get girls. The correlation to the men's suicide epidemic is roughly the same as what correlates to the heroin epidemic and being a Donald Trump supporter. There is no doubt about the profile of the unfortunate people who have become a statistic in the male suicide epidemic in America. The questions become, how did we get here? What can be done to fix it? And do enough people have the courage to accept the facts? So far, I have seen mostly lip service on the subject and no action. When searching for causes of male suicide, the first argument that's usually mentioned is that men are afraid or not good at expressing their feelings, and that they are unwilling to ask for help. Society, we are told, prefers men who are stoic and don't share their feelings. Now, this argument has various problems. Number one, white men are 2.5 times more likely to commit suicide than black or Hispanic men. In addition, the suicide rate for black and Hispanic men have decreased in the last 20 years. Now think about this. If the reason why men commit suicide is due to their inability to express their feelings, then it would affect all men, but it doesn't. It seems to affect white men. As evidenced by the fact that the epidemic consists primarily of white men, then it is responsible to conclude that expressing feelings is not the problem. Number two, a man's perception that society in general, and women in particular, prefer stoic men who don't share their feelings is an ignorant distortion of people's response to masculinity and masculinity itself. It says much more about the deficiencies in the man saying it than it does about the people he is trying to misrepresent. This false dichotomy argument is an oversimplification of what people admire and tries to rule out that men can't be both macho and sensitive, or lovers and fighters, or peaceful warriors. If a man ever complains that life is confusing because he doesn't know whether to be strong or sensitive, has already lost, and is obviously not authentic if he is waiting for society to tell him how to act. And by the way, the answer is yes. You should be both strong and sensitive, depending on the situation. I don't know why anybody needs to be told that. Psychologist Carl Jung, Jungian psychologist Robert Moore, and mythologist Douglas Gillette argue that masculinity is made up of four archetypical energies that serve different purposes in men. These archetypes are the king, the warrior, the lover, and the magician. The king represents impeccable core values, practical wisdom, and integrity. The warrior represents a disciplined, decisive man of purpose. The lover represents emotional intelligence and sensitivity. The magician represents intelligence and the secret power of obtaining knowledge. These masculine archetypes can be seen, have been documented, and have been revered in every civilization dating back to antiquity. Every religion is based on these archetypes. Every Disney movie has also been based on Jungian archetypes. Every great movie with a heroic lead character, such as Gladiator, Braveheart, 300, and all the Rocky movies, have a masculine role model that is a representation of the masculine archetypes, meaning they are physically dominant, are informed by their feelings, and are purpose driven, reluctant warriors, as opposed to being just an aggressive, kill for thrills psychopath. Men who claim to not understand this, they have a lot of growing up to do, and they need to stop blaming society for their lack of personal responsibility and what it takes to be a man. There are men who would like to be more open about their feelings in a relationship. However, many Women who are looking for stability and security have difficulty when a man is being honest about his fears. Verbalizing fears to certain women is a risky move because it could make her feel unsafe. Although the feeling is very natural for many women, it is nevertheless unproductive and can be hurtful. Now, this may be remedied by education, which may lead to accurate empathy. It is a fallacy to say men need to express their feelings to feel better. Men need their feelings and opinions to be heard and to be validated to feel better. That is a big difference. Men who try to express their feelings and prefer intimate conversations with their partner feel worse when their partner doesn't have the ability to listen and express unconditional positive regard. Over time, this may cause relational distress, adds to the shame, and does contribute to the male suicide epidemic. One relative constant in being a marriage and family therapist is that the wife will present as having low marital satisfaction and wants the husband to do something about it. The husband will be concerned about her marital dissatisfaction and wants to know what he can do to help. In doing this, he makes his needs smaller to attend to her needs. This puts him in depression and despair because he can't be fully responsible for his wife's feelings, and there is little emphasis on his feelings. Even if he can keep the relationship together, it is done at the expense of himself. The most difficult part is that more than 70% of divorces are filed by women. Many men have difficulty coping with this failure because of not having supportive social connections. However, this may be offset by many men who don't feel comfortable with talking more but prefer an action plan. The surge in suicide rates have taken place during times when the working middle class has been economically and psychologically stressed. Automation, outsourcing, and globalization contribute to job losses in America. Industries such as manufacturing, coal, and steel have been reliable employers for many years, but not anymore. The onset of technology and computers have been leaving people without college degrees in a very difficult situation. During this time, many of the people who have previously enjoyed good pay and health insurance through the power of unions have been voting against their best interest. There has been a sharp decline in private sector union membership, which has destroyed the middle class's chance to fight for higher wages. The inflation adjusted median wage has barely increased since 1973, and yet the CEOs at the top are making a killing. From 1973 to 2017, worker productivity has increased 77%, while wages rose only 13.4%. People are working harder for less money. Anecdotally speaking, when I was 5 years old, around 1970, my father pumped gas and my mother worked at Woolworths part time. But we lived in Elmont on Long Island in a two-story house with a basement, a garage, front yard, backyard, and we had a Cadillac in the driveway. In 2019, if you have a full-time minimum wage job, you might be living in your car. Maybe, because you might not be able to afford a car. The middle class in America has been shrinking for about 4 decades. It's difficult to draw a straight line from income inequality to suicide, but the information is more than compelling. It needs to be noted that the suicide rates in Western European countries have been going down. The differences lie in that income inequality is less stratified. Everyone has health care, social safety nets are stronger, and worker retraining programs are mainstream. From a psychological point of view, the best aspect might be that people who benefit from these programs are not shamed and they're not considered to be a drain on society. Studies in the United States have shown that a 10% increase in the minimum wage and earned income tax credit will decrease the suicide rates for people without college degrees. Personally, I question how much of this information can actually help older, white male, rural gun owners without educations to curb suicide when they continuously and enthusiastically vote for people who are against the actions and viewpoints that can actually help them. Although historically white men have done better than black men economically, they are still 2.5 times more likely to commit suicide. Ann Case and Angus Deaton have coined the term deaths of despair to put a label on the white male suicides, the heroin epidemic, and those with liver disease from alcohol abuse. The white middle class has seen their power diminish. The feeling of failure, excess stress, loss of identity, and not being able to do as well as their fathers may affect white men more than minorities. This is due to having a history of success and therefore the expectation that they were going to be better off economically and socially than minorities. Some might call this white privilege. Black and Hispanic men cope better with disappointment and don't react as much to economic downturns because they never actually bought into the American dream for obvious reasons. As George Carlin said, it has to be a dream because you have to be asleep to believe it. The ugly truth is that many white males worry about women and minorities gaining power and they resent the competition. As they perceive themselves as more hopeless, they become more vicious and intolerant. As a therapist, I see a group of people who need a lot of help. But as an American citizen, I see a group of people that need to be guarded against. There is a racially tinged segment of the white male population that remembers America being greater when there were less women and minorities with jobs. To them, equality feels like oppression. Let me say that again, it's important. To these white men, equality feels like oppression. They are angry and they want their country back. They also want their identity, their power, and their masculinity back. But how do they do it? Some men see gun ownership as part of their identity. It gives them power and increases their ability to protect themselves and their families. Unfortunately, according to a 2017 CDC report, it is clear that a majority of people who kill with a gun, they shoot themselves, not others. Suicides account for 60% of gun deaths. Black men are 10 times more likely than white men to die from homicide. Knowing the depression symptoms for men, which includes anger, irritability, and risk taking, it may be easy to correlate many of these homicides to actually being suicide by proxy or suicide by cop. At this time, I don't know of any real empirical evidence to back this up, but again, it's compelling. The tax cut championed by Trump and congressional Republicans sent 82% of the gains to the richest Americans, and they have doubled the annual amount exempt from estate taxes. The middle class, who is in the deaths of despair category, will not benefit from these new policies. In addition, it has added to the deficit, which will prompt more conservatives to propose the shrinking of social programs. Thus, the middle class gets punished again with, you guessed it, the help of the same middle class, white, rural, uneducated voters who like to vote against themselves. To be honest, I'm not sure how to lower the male suicide rate, but then again, I haven't seen anybody else have any ideas or even have the guts to say the truth. Empirical evidence suggests that having meaning and purpose and supportive social connections may be the most important aspects of having a happy life. Both will help people to improve distress tolerance and move people through challenging times. More specifically, education or a skill is what is necessary to become economically mobile. However, a new study tells us that 57% of this particular cohort, known as, again, the people in the depths of despair, they believe that a college education is an absolute waste of time and money and is nothing more than liberal indoctrination. Studies have been clear that over a lifetime, a person with a college degree will make about $1 million more than a person with only a high school diploma. Within a changing world, you must have the ability to adapt. The ability to assimilate or accommodate new information into an existing cognitive schema is paramount if one wishes to move safely into the future. Unfortunately for many conservatives, they fear progress and denounce it as liberal indoctrination. Therefore, you can't help people who don't want to be helped. It is within the grasp of these people to go back to school and educate themselves to get a better job. I know I did. Why can't they? Instead, many of these people are on public assistance and waiting for the coal industry, the manufacturing industries, and the Betamax repair businesses to boom again, while waiting for businesses to return that are basically obsolete. They receive government assistance and yet complain about lazy people who use, you guessed it, government assistance. Meaning and purpose is extremely important, but somehow even this concept has been turned upside down. Some people choose victimhood, entitlement, and anger at perceived oppressors as their identity and purpose. Their anger feels like a strong emotion, but it is definitely a weak defense against their inability to take responsibility for their own life. At this time, the people from this particular cohort seem to have chosen to go through the world bullying people by being the biggest victim in the room. I'd like to think that the overt racism is just a projection of their own inadequacies, and with some empathy and some understanding, they will be decent members of society. As a therapist, I can understand that hurt people, they do hurt others. But no one should condone bad behavior. Unfortunately, I haven't seen any evidence of a positive change. The National American Election Study, a study by Orenfrond and Clement, and data published by the Pew Research Center have all found that economic status and concerns about the tax structure are less closely correlated to those in the aforementioned cohort. This may be one of the reasons why the people who are at risk financially haven't offered any backlash whatsoever after the tariffs came into effect, which directly hurts them. There is a stronger correlation to racial anxiety and a fear of racial diversity. This does not bode well for the country or for the individuals who are experiencing difficulties. At this time, they are more willing to direct their energy at scapegoating, acting out against others, and harming themselves. Thus, we now have the suicide epidemic, the heroin epidemic, and the cultish following of Trump. They could work on being the best version of themselves to help their families and community, but they choose not to. And this does have consequences. Hate crimes have been rising faster since the election of Trump, who seems to be the demagogue for white, angry, uneducated, suicidal men with grievances. Let's be clear about the definition of a demagogue. A demagogue is a political leader who seeks support by appealing to the desires and prejudices of ordinary people rather than by using a rational argument. Or let's just say it a little bit more bluntly. Trump has shrewdly exploited anger, animosity, hatred, racism, misogyny, hopelessness, victimhood, and polarization for his narcissistic political gain. A recent study from the University of North Texas has shown that counties that have hosted a Trump rally saw a 226% rise in hate crimes over comparable counties that did not host a rally. The white man's suicide and heroin epidemic seems like a dystopian society where there is no productive solutions that the people who are most affected are willing to consider. An example is that we are constantly bombarded with stopping the heroin epidemic by trying to have a war on drugs. But make no mistake about this, until we start worrying about the demand of drugs instead of the supply of drugs, no one is seriously providing a solution. On the good side, it is my professional and personal opinion that decreasing male suicide is no different than it always has been. A stable family unit with love and support is a start. Education is important. People need to be taught how to think, not what to think. One of the problems with social media is that people without open minds have the opportunity to gravitate towards what they know and shut out points of view that are foreign to them. This is because their thinking is faulty. Without ideas being rigorously challenged, the stage is set to create extremism and polarization. To put it more bluntly, groupthink without open, liberal, progressive minds creates an incestuous, stagnant poison. There will be no birthing of new ideas without the fertilization from different perspectives. Sperm meets egg. It's that basic. Everyone needs to find meaning and purpose while being encouraged to find mastery in some type of endeavor. They need to take responsibility for their thoughts, their emotions, and behaviors, and stop blaming other people. People do better when they are connected to themselves, others, and their environment. I'm Joe Perroni from the Rise Above Project. Please subscribe and tell a friend. Thank you.